in the ancient Roman Empire, already beginning in the 1st century, and this would pretty much remain the case throughout the remainder of the ancient Roman Empire's history before its final collapse in the 5th century. There were 3 competing philosophies, schools of philosophy, ideologies in the Roman Empire, namely Epicureanism, after the Greek philosopher Epicurus, probably famous for the popular and grossly inaccurate notion that one should eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That was not the gist of Epicureanism. On the contrary, the gist of Epicureanism was the statement in Latin, virtus in media stat, that is, virtue, the good life, happiness, is in the middle, meaning it's in balance, not extremes. So not what's referred to today as hedonism or any other extreme forms, rather balance. Okay. Secondly, Platonism, as in Plato. No, not what you played with in kindergarten with a D, rather Plato with a T. Platonism. The third and the most popular among Roman thinkers in Latin was the only school of philosophy never referred to as a school of philosophy by its practitioners, at least early on, in the ancient Greco-Roman world. And that is Stoicism. And once again, unfortunately, today, even among professors, teachers of philosophy, Stoicism is unfortunately more often than not misrepresented as being a moral code, a code of ethics at its heart. That is the exact opposite of what Stoicism was. Stoicism was the only school of philosophy, and again, they did not like to refer to themselves as a school of philosophy, was the only school of philosophy which the ancient Greeks despised, hated these ideas. The ancient Romans loved them for reasons we're going to discover, at least in part, shortly. To begin with, Stoicism was founded by a guy who was not Greek. His name was Zeno, not as in the Princess Warrior, but Zeno, Z-E-N-O, who was from some island in the Eastern Mediterranean, probably Cyprus, that heard about this new school recently founded in Athens, Greece by this guy named Plato. And Zeno decided, well, if this is the place to go to learn, I guess that's what I want to do and that's where I should be. Zeno arrives at the School of Athens, Plato's academy, and after a couple of weeks realizes that it's bullshit. And Zeno says, you guys talking about all of your crazy ideas, you're just pulling these things out of, well, some orifice of your anatomy, or at best out of thin air. So Zeno says, you know what, I'm going to go back to my frat house. I'll sit on my porch. Anyone that would like to join me is welcome to do so. BYOB, or VW, wine. And anyone who's interested, why don't we just get together and observe the phenomena of the cosmos around us? And instead of presuming a priori everything, a priori we've already discussed in previous lecture sessions, why don't we try this crazy new concept called thinking based on reason alone, and not presuming, much less assuming anything. We'll just sit on my porch, my front porch of my frat house here in Athens, which in Greek was called a stoa, front porch, stoa, from which we then get this term for this would-be philosophy, Stoicism. So it's not based, once again, on some other philosophical ideology or its guru. It's not based certainly on a divinely revealed religion. It's based on reason, period. And certainly not on any sort of pre-existing moral or ethical code, so-called, much less, at least at the outset, trying to create a moral or ethical code based on its own research, analyses, syntheses, critical thinking, and conclusions. That is the heart, the essence of Stoicism, and which is why most Greeks did not like it. The hoi polloi, the masses, both in ancient Greece and later ancient Rome, didn't like it. But ancient Roman thinkers in Latin loved it. And it was the primary influence of, if we want to refer to a particular school of thought or philosophy, it was that which allowed the ancient Romans to develop, again, something we've discussed in previous lecture series sessions, ancient Roman law and their constitutional republic. In the first century BCE and the first century CE, there were a number of adherents to this radical new way of thinking, radical because it's based on reason, crazy idea, that developed a word, a new term in the Latin language. And that term is unitas, unitas, not as the more or less famous American football player, American football, in the, I guess, 50s or 60s, Johnny Unitas, not Unitas, 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 which looks and sounds like unity in English. What is unity? What is unity? Is there a synonym in English for unity? Unanimity? Unanimous? Togetherness? The Los Angeles 1992 Rodney King-inspired riots of can't we all just get along? No. That is not what unitas meant for the ancient Roman thinkers, Stoics, if we wish to call them that, in Latin. In English, we must translate the term unitas as oneness / unity. If by unity we mean oneness, well, then okay. But if by unity we mean unanimity, togetherness, and any other synonym that might correspond to that notion. That is not what it was. The Stoics were fixated, obsessed with this concept. And one of the reasons is because of one of those other competing schools of philosophy or ideology, namely Platonism or Middle Platonism at this particular time, and what would soon become Neoplatonism. Platonism, one of its fundamental tenets, which is simultaneously a logical contradiction, is the one and the many. Everything's one, man. But it's like there's so many ones. That's deep. Yeah. So the Stoics said, you know, if you're altering your neurology, the proper or at least natural functioning of your cerebral cortex and other functions of the brain, then that actually may not be a religious experience or deeper, more profound knowledge. It just may be bullshit because you are chemically, electrically causing a short circuit and a malfunctioning of your nature-given apparatus called a brain. Maybe. So we're going to try something else. We're not going to touch that shit and pretend it's something that it's not, delusionally, and we will just kind of work with reason, maybe? Okay. And consequently, let's look at this concept of the one and the many, seeing as how this is now pervaded all of society. People on the street, would-be academicians, institutions of higher, no pun intended, education, no pun intended with education either, celebrities, hell, even our own politicians. Let's just try to stay focused on this concept and analyze it based on reason alone. Unitas, unitas. And in doing so, without the assistance of injecting foreign substances into the human body, the Stoics come up with a 12 very clear, identifiable 12-point definition of and for unitas. We're not going to go over all 12 points, don't worry. But the first 6 are of extreme importance and significance. And on the surface, they're very simple. But in the end, they are rather profound, not just because of what they actually may betray in terms of what actually is beneath all of this, but what they could be further interpreted as, manipulated as. Okay, so 6 points, a 6-point definition, if you will, of this term, the Stoic term unitas in Latin, unitas, which we translate in English as unity / or better yet, oneness, O-N-E-N-E-S-S, oneness / unity. If by unity we mean oneness, and by both we mean what we're about to go through, these 6 points, then okay. 6 points. The first point is that the Stoics say, between the first century BC and the first century CE, they say, you know what? Unitas is not plurality. Unitas, oneness/unity, is not plurality. And you may be wondering, well, duh, that seems obvious. Does it? Have you looked around your university lately? The obvious does not seem so obvious any longer. Moreover, as we just mentioned, the prevailing, competing philosophy at the time was that of Platonism, or at least Middle Platonism. The one and the many, the one and plurality. Somehow they're different, but somehow they're the same, man. No. Oneness, logically, by reason, is not the same as plurality. This is a violation of the law of contradiction, or the law of non-contradiction in logic. One thing cannot both be and not be at the same time if the two are mutually negated. Okay. So oneness, unitas, is not plurality. And they go on. How is this the case? Well, to be more specific, point number 2, unitas in Latin does not equal unus, unus in Latin. Unus, meaning in English, one alone, which is a numerical quantitative quality. Rather, unitas is in Latin unum, unum, meaning in English, one thing, one reality only. One thing only, which is a qualitative attribute, characteristic. Point number 3 to this 6-point definition. Unitas is not a composite. Unitas is not a composite. What is a composite? If you can recall maybe a chemistry class, what is a composite? A composite is if I take, a number of different things, let's say pens, right? And I put them all together. What do I have? Well, I got a wad of pens in my hand. I have a composite. Things that are extraneously from different parts and areas brought together and put together as one, but they're still kind of loosely disconnected. They're not really one. That's a composite. And that, for the Stoics, is not what unitas is. Rather, unitas is uninterrupted continuity cohering in itself. Unitas is uninterrupted continuity cohering in itself. What the hell does that mean? Fair enough. Uninterrupted. There's no break. There's no pause. Okay, no break, uninterrupted. Continuity, it's seamless. It keeps going on forever. So uninterrupted, no break, continuity, while it just continues going on. Uninterrupted continuity. Cohering in itself. Cohering, it somehow stays together, which would make sense if it's uninterrupted and continuous. Cohering in itself, it itself keeps itself together. You talk about getting heady, and they didn't need to smoke weed or whatever to come up with these zany ideas. All right. By the way, because I know you're out there, props to my students who, whatevs. We're all good. It's all good. Don't worry. It won't affect your participation grade. Might help it out. Anyway. Okay. Point number 4 in this 6-point definition of this concept of unitas. It requires two, or perhaps even requires is not the best way to say it. Unitas includes two mechanisms that are essential to how it works. This uninterrupted continuity cohering in itself, for example. Two things. In Latin, point 4a, a fons, F-O-N-S, not happy days, Fonzie, fons, F-O-N-S, meaning a source, like a font or a fountain. Thinking back to our paradigm, semiotics, water. Okay. A fons, F-O-N-S, a source. And point 4b, a vinculum, like the Church of St. Peter in Vincoli here in Rome, near the Colosseum, Vincoli, which is where Michelangelo's famous Moses statue is located. Anyway, vinculum, a bond, chain. This idea of a source and a bond, points number 4a and b, are necessary for this concept, this thing, this reality of unitas. Okay. Point number 5 of this 6-point definition. Everything that exists, everything in the cosmos, again, Greek term, whether it's cosmos or kosmos, cosmos. Everything in the cosmos, the universe, three things. Comes from, contains in itself, which should make sense, and ultimately returns to unitas. Everything in the cosmos comes from, contains in itself, and ultimately returns to unitas, this oneness / unity. Sixthly, and finally, intentio in Latin. Intentio, which misleadingly looks like intention in English. It's not what it means. Intentio in Latin means tension. Tension is also an important, necessary, fundamental aspect of unitas, how it works, how it stays together. Intentio, tension. Again, think of physics. Tension. Pushing together, opposing, repelling, pulling apart. Whether they're electrons, positrons, neutrons, bosons, whatever, right? In an atom or around an atom. Okay. Tension, intentio, is also a necessary, this tension, this process of tension. All right. Is a necessary intrinsic part of how this unitas thing works. Now, before moving on to the next development of this concept, once again, among ancient Roman Stoic influenced thinkers in Latin, will develop this concept further. Already, these 6 points. Look through them again. Does this look like or sound like it could become, it could be used, it could be manipulated as a blueprint for something? Anything come to mind? I'll give you a hint. If you were to visually, graphically come up with the simplest symbol, glyph, emoji in your arsenal, what would you use to kind of capture this 6-point definition concept of unitas? A little chick coming out of an egg? A shamrock? What do they call it? SMH, smacking my head? Whatever that is. I don't know. Much simpler. A circle in 2 dimensions, or a sphere in 3 dimensions. And indeed, in ancient Rome already, the perfect circle, the perfect sphere, is a symbol of the divine. In other words, this 6-point concept looks like it could wind up being used, applied, misused, misapplied, manipulated as a schema, a pattern for monotheism. And that is exactly what is going to happen right around the year 200 with a guy named Tertullian, to whom we return next.